to the Q&A all about our world cruise. Today I'm going to be going through all the questions you asked and sharing all of the finer details, the good, the bad, the highs, the lows, the pros, the cons, and the nitty gritty of what it was actually like to go on a world cruise. If you're new around here, hi, I'm Brogan and I make travel, home and lifestyle vlogs. I would love it if you subscribed. I make lots of different types of travel videos and the cruise vlogs have been one of my most popular ever. So if you have joined us from that series, then thank you. And if you haven't seen them, I will leave them linked below. But in summary, and just in case you haven't caught up with everything, we went on a P&O Cruises world cruise on Arcadia between February to April 2024. We actually did 60 of the 100-day trip. So we flew to Auckland to join the ship and then carried on all the way back to the UK via New Zealand, Australia, Southeast Asia, including Singapore and Hong Kong. Then we went down to Mauritius and South Africa, Tenerife and back to Southampton. It was unbelievable. I still can't even fathom that we actually did it. We also got married on board, which was so amazing. I've done a whole wedding Q&A all about the wedding day at sea. If you want to go and watch that, I'll leave that linked below as well. And obviously we were on honeymoon and we celebrated my 30th birthday. So this really was a once in a lifetime special trip and we learned so much. We already loved cruising before. We had been to the Caribbean twice, Norway and the Mediterranean. We've only ever sailed on P&O Cruises and we have worked with them before, but this trip was our own and we were just so excited to do it and spent about 2 years planning it and organising it and doing all the logistics, etc. So today I'm going to go through all your brilliant questions and hopefully cover everything, and I would love it if you'd leave a comment and share any of your favourite moments or favourite vlog from the series, because Benj and I have gone back and forth over which ones we think are the best. So that's basically the summary. Without further ado, let's get into your questions. What made you choose the half world and not the full world? The world cruise that P&O Cruises specifically offer is on Arcadia and it was from Southampton all the way back to Southampton in the UK, 100 days, and a lot of the guests on board were doing the whole thing, but I would say there was a good portion of people like us that came and went or joined later and stayed to the end. And so there were lots of options that P&O Cruises do actually give you if you want to do a leg or a segment. So we chose to fly to Auckland. We did have a lot of people come and go at Sydney and Singapore and Hong Kong. We chose to do it this way because it just worked for us and ticked a lot of our boxes. So the things that we had to consider were budget. That was the biggest one. Obviously, if you're doing the whole world cruise, the extra 40 days does make it a lot more expensive. So that was the first thing. Secondly was location. We weren't that fussed about the first 40 days. The third was the Atlantic crossing, although it's absolutely fine and we definitely will do it one day because Ben has a thing about wanting to do the Atlantic crossing. I didn't want to do it. It is quite long and it's quite a lot of sea days and it can be quite rough, so I personally just would have rather have skipped the Atlantic crossing and flown instead, which worked better for us. The time away from home was another factor. My mum was looking after our dog Bonnie and we also had a house sitter, and I had to work out my timings for my work and my commitments around it. So 100 days was just that little bit too long for us. Even 60 days was a real stretch. Originally, we wanted to go away for like 3 or 4 weeks. So the fact we already extended it to 60 days was a lot longer in our opinion. So there was no need to do the whole 100 days just for the sake of saying we'd done the whole thing. And the last thing we had to factor in was just actually the length in general. Did we want to be away for that long? There's a few things to factor, but we didn't necessarily feel we had to do the whole thing. Would you ever do a full world cruise having now done half? I think it depends on all the things I just mentioned. If I could have the time off, if we had the money, if the locations were absolute priorities and essentials. Never say never. I don't think it's necessarily on our radar to do it again anytime soon because we have other trips and other things we want to, but we have looked at the South America one, which is 75 days. It's not necessarily about achieving doing the whole thing, more a case of does it go to the places that we want to go to is more of a priority. Top 3 moments of the trip apart from your wedding. I found this way too hard to write down 3, so I've done 10. Forgive me, but I've done my top 10, which even then I was like, oh, it was so hard because There were moments that just being on the ocean and cruising was just a highlight, and being so far removed from the rest of the world sometimes, and my life at home not always being connected, and being in a complete different time zone, and just waking up and the first thing I did was going out onto the balcony in my pajamas and smelling the sea air and looking out to the sea or watching the sunrise. They were moments that were so magic and special that I just can't explain. But obviously highlights are always going to be those bigger things, but keep that in mind because there were moments that I just absolutely loved. The first one was the business class flight. How could we not include that? Just to kickstart the trip, I'd never flown business class like that. I'd never gone that far. I've never been to Australia and New Zealand. It was unbelievable. We flew with Emirates. We did a whole video on it. I felt like I was treated like royalty. It was amazing and so exciting to start our wedding and honeymoon in that way. I couldn't have asked for a better flight and experience for my first time going to New Zealand. Speaking of New Zealand, I put that as like a general highlight. I just loved New Zealand. The beauty, the nature, the people, the places we visited, exploring Auckland, the Weheke Island where we did the bikes and the wine. We did the Hobbiton set. I just loved New Zealand so much. I'm going to talk about that later, but that was a highlight. Number 3 was all the animals. I just felt so surrounded by animals everywhere we went. I loved the kiwi bird in New Zealand, the emu or ostrich that we saw often at the zoo or on our safari. Speaking of animals, obviously seeing all the fish and snorkeling in the Great Barrier Reef, something I've wanted to do for such a long time. Couldn't not put that in my top highlights. The cable car over the rainforest in Cairns, it was beautiful, such a great experience. So different when we were in Australia, going from like Brisbane Koala Sanctuary and Sydney as a city and then the Great Barrier Reef and then doing Cairns. It was just really cool that we were able to achieve so many different things at each spot. Hong Kong Disneyland. Need I say much more about that? I'm a huge Disney fan and it's my bucket list dream to tick off all the Disney parks around the world. So that was number 4 out of 6 for me, which is so exciting. I just loved it. Had the best time there. Singapore in general, just loved Singapore so much. Gardens by the Bay was an ultimate highlight. I loved it in the day. I loved it at night. It was so pretty. I could honestly imagine just sitting there and reading with a nice book, but going into the domes and seeing the waterfalls and the flora and fauna, it was just amazing. Everything was amazing. Seeing the Sydney Opera House for the first time after seeing it every New Year's Eve on telly with the fireworks and in so many films, and I had dreamed of going to Sydney, so that was absolutely a highlight. Just exploring Sydney, being able to do that with Benj because he'd already been before, so him being able to show me his favourite places and why he loved it so much, it was just amazing. Everything was amazing. Our first safari experience, could not mention that, in Durban. Loved seeing all the animals. Absolutely makes me want to go and do a bigger safari because that was a game reserve and I'd love to do one of the safaris with the big 5 and maybe stay somewhere under some beautiful stars, like a camping experience. I just would really like to do that before I die. Definitely on my bucket list. And lastly, number 10 I put as Cape Town. I will talk a bit more about Cape Town later because there's more questions about what surprised me the most, but Cape Town was just so interesting and so much fun. I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. So they were my top 10. We made some incredible memories and we had so many moments that would pinch me, bucket list, oh my goodness, this is special. So I feel very lucky that I got to do so many, and they were just some of the highlights. There were so many more, even just like going shopping with Benj and so many of the nice meals we had, but we'll keep answering the questions because I'm sure I'll cover it all. Has this trip made you a more confident traveller? Absolutely. I already feel like I was a fairly confident traveller, but I'm the kind of traveller that goes to one destination, does it and comes back. It's very rare we do any sort of road trip or we go to more than one place. This trip gave us the confidence to be able to make really great plans in these places, to go further, to expand what we actually do. Benj and I do like a holiday where we sit on a sun lounger and we read a book and we eat good food, but this kind of trip made us, I think, more cultured in terms of trying different local foods or being in conversation with local taxi drivers when we were going to a new destination, or reading up on history and learning about the places. It just made us more well-rounded, I think, and educated, but also confidence to be able to do something similar in the future. And already we're doing a UK road trip in July. I don't think we would have necessarily had that confidence had we not done something like this. This trip showed us that really anything is possible if we put our mind to it, and the world is so big and there's so much to still explore. How did you plan your days in ports you explored without an excursion or a guide? The best way to explain this is actually just generally how we planned our days on land. So the easiest way for us to figure it out was looking at which destinations we wanted to do independently. For example, Singapore and Sydney were no-brainers for us. Not only does the ship literally dock right there, but we wanted to be able to do quite a lot in the time we had. Then we looked at all our remaining locations and had to work out, were we near the town or city or destination, or were we further out? So was the port further away? For example, Mauritius, the port was about an hour from some of the beach resorts we wanted to go to. In that case, we had to decide, do we want to independently get ourselves to there, or do we want to utilise a P&O Cruises shore experience? And then it was breaking down whether we wanted to do an actual fully organised trip with them, or sometimes P&O Cruises offered the opportunity to do it on your own, which was basically a bus that took you from the port to the place, dropped you off and picked you up again at a certain time. And that still allowed us to do things independently, but meant that our transport was booked and organised. Then when we did pick and do a full shore experience, so for example, the mud baths in Vietnam, or we did the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, that was organised as a shore experience, and Durban, the safari we did, all of those just made sense to us because we didn't want to have to research and find who does these things. It meant that it was all booked and organised, and it was with companies that P&O Cruises trusted and they could just sort it out. That was how we planned things. We never used external companies to book shore experiences because you can't always trust that they're going to drop you off or pick you up at the right times, and I never wanted the ship to leave without us, obviously. However, Cape Town was the only exception where we booked the red bus tour. It was hard to make calls, especially when we did the mud baths in Vietnam. Obviously that's not going to show us and give us a full rounded experience of the country. It was more a case of we wanted to do an interesting fun activity that day, and we'll have to go back to Vietnam and do it completely differently. Leading on nicely, this question said, did you book all your land excursions beforehand, and how do you budget for that on top? So yes, we pretty much booked everything before we left the UK, and we budgeted and booked them basically one at a time. So every few weeks or every couple of months, when we were topping up our savings and we had some money ready to book something, we would go on the P&O Cruises website and see what was available. There were some that we had to book really fast, like the Great Barrier Reef and the Durban Safari. There was just no questions. We booked them pretty much as soon as we could because we knew they would sell out. But for ones that we were like umming and ahhing over, I just booked them as and when we were ready. P&O Cruises actually ended up adding some, so there were times that we would book one, change our mind, cancel it, get a refund, rebook something else, which is all kind of part of the planning experience, I guess. The stop that made you surprised the most? Cape Town. I think for me it was the variety of things to do in the city. So you've got Table Mountain on the cable car, we did the vineyards, the nature with the seals at Seal Island, the waterfront for the V&A waterfront felt very like city shopping, and then the coastline and beach and the bus tour. Everything about Cape Town to me ticked so many boxes as an experience and place that gave us so much to do, and so that's why I'd really love to return to Cape Town. Food was really high quality. We had some of the best meals and food there when we ate at that time out market and when we went to the vineyard, which I'll talk about later. And also the prices for things were brilliant in terms of the food, the experiences, like the bus tickets were so cheap and for what we got, and the souvenirs. So I just, yeah, good value for money as well. Did you wish that you had longer in each stop? Loved watching your vlogs, thanks for sharing. Oh, thanks so much for watching. This is a good question because I think any cruise you do, there will be an element of, I wish we had longer, or you might go to a destination and say, do you know what, didn't need to spend any longer here, got what we needed, ticked that box, done and dusted. And that was pretty much how it was on the World Cruise too, because there were some locations like Bitang in Indonesia that we saw it, met the locals, went around and felt very much done there. And then there were other places like Singapore that I thought I would need longer, but actually we achieved quite a lot, and leaving there I felt pretty satisfied and content. So I thought I'd want longer but didn't actually need it. Of course there were times where I felt like I didn't want to leave because I was having such a great time and I would have liked a bit longer, like Hong Kong definitely, because we only were able to prioritize Disney, and of course I would have loved a bit more time in Hong Kong. I really wanted to go up to Victoria Peak and look at the view, but actually it was raining and apparently there was no view. So times like that, if you're staying somewhere for a week and the weather's not good on one of the days, you can just go the next day, you know? So there were a few times, but most of it I was pretty happy. I felt like, yeah, seen it, done it, great. Let's carry on. Apart from the seals in South Africa, did you see any other marine life, dolphins or whales? Yes, we saw dolphins a few times on the ship. Not as often as I would have loved. I don't know why I thought I'd see dolphins every day. I didn't see them every day, but I did see them a few times. And the captain would come over the tannoy system, I guess, and say, just to let you know, there's dolphins on the port side or starboard side, and so we would all get up from where we were and rush to the window and have a little look. So there were moments that we caught like a pool of dolphins and it was so magic. Are there places you visited that you are 100% planning to explore further? The number one place that we absolutely definitely want to go back to is New Zealand. I fell in love with it. I just loved how beautiful it was, and our big bucket list dream trip would be to do the North and the South Island, stay in a motorhome and do it all, which is the exact trip that we both talked about on our very first conversation on Tinder together. So the fact we were able to do New Zealand and start the trip here and get a flavour and get to see it for the first time has given me the confidence to know what to do, what not to do on that big road trip that we can now plan for the future, which I'm really excited about. When you were at sea, what did you get up to? So we did get quite a few questions about sea days, what we did, and also if we ever found the sea days too long. And neither Benji or I never found it too long or too many days at sea. We did like 4 days and 5 days. The longest we did was 9 days, which was after Cape Town before we got to Tenerife. Did Tenerife for a day and then 3 days and then we were home. So we were basically at sea for almost 2 weeks with only one stop, which sounds like a really long time. But for most of the trip, I was basically working, and I feel like that's a huge privilege to be able to work and travel at the same time. I feel very lucky that I was able to do that. I loved working from the crow's nest or from our cabin. So that was pretty straightforward. Benji did a lot of sport. He absolutely loved playing cricket every day on a sea day at 2 o'clock. He also played football and he did deck quoits and table tennis, all sorts, any kind of sport, Benj was there. I went to a few classes. I did some art and I went to a colouring class one day, which was so therapeutic just to sit with some colouring pens. They had some pre-done colouring sheets. I also learned how to do macrame, which was like a knot crochet thing. Did some key rings. We went to the cinema, we did the Headliners Theatre. We probably went to like 2 or 3 shows a week. Wasn't going to one every night because not everything appealed to us, but we did comedy and singers and some musicals that the Headliners Theatre Company were putting on. There were some really amazing high quality shows and the crew work so hard, night in, night out, performing. I was so impressed. But sometimes we were just happy to sit in a bar, listen to a pianist or somebody playing the guitar. We were often in the Rising Sun, which is their kind of pub space, and we did lots of quizzes there, but I think the thing we did the most was definitely play board games. Hours and hours and hours of games. Lots of big potato games, of course. Played a lot of Herd Mentality and Dino Dump, a normal pack of cards, but we also did Monopoly and Cluedo, and we made friends who I'll talk about later, and we played for like 6 hours of Monopoly one day. So that was really productive. Obviously did some exercise. I mostly enjoyed walking around the ship or swimming. I didn't love the gym. I just didn't really want to be in there much because I was having such a nice time doing everything else. But the gym was a good space. There was nothing wrong with it. I just didn't go in there as often as I thought I would. And I didn't read as many books, but I was doing a little bit of reading here and there. Sunbathing. Some people say to me, like, how did you do 9 days at sea? And I'm like, Honestly, are you joking? There was so much to do all the time. We were easily entertained. Towards the end of the 9 days, I was certainly ready to get off and be on land again, you know, but I wasn't ever feeling confined. I was totally spoilt for choice for things. And obviously we were enjoying a lot of food, eating lots of nice things, going for like a nice fancy lunch, or doing something we hadn't done before. They put a barbecue by the pool, or we did afternoon tea. There were so many nice things. We even did the spa one day as well. Like loads and loads. Was 2 months too long? Might sound a silly question, but genuinely interested. Not a silly question. We got asked this quite a lot actually, and 2 months was perfect for us. It did go by fairly fast, I will say, but at the time when we were in it, it didn't. It felt like we had so much to do and look forward to, and so much going on, and it was really exciting. So 2 months was kind of perfect. Did you ever feel claustrophobic in the room or wish you had a bigger room? No, I think obviously we were in a mini suite, so we were one below the biggest size room you could get, so we can't complain on size of the room because it was huge, and you could easily do the whole world cruise with a balcony cabin. But the space in the mini suite was perfect because we had 2 desks, which gave Benji space and me space to do my work. And obviously we got ready for our wedding day in there, so you know, we had lots of extra stuff and a wedding dress and a suit, so the space was really good. I never felt claustrophobic. There was always like room to move around. Nothing felt cramped. I was able to fit all of our things in the drawers and space really easily. Definitely helped that I had like IKEA boxes and ways to store things, but never felt like, oh my gosh, I need to get out of this room, I'm getting cabin fever, which I thought I might, but I didn't. Would you have preferred to have been on a bigger ship for that long, or was Arcadia the perfect size? Arcadia was genuinely perfect, and I wouldn't have wanted a bigger ship because the amount of times you're sort of going from one place to another, Arcadia was really easy to walk around the whole ship without feeling like you've got to go a mile. Sometimes on the bigger ships we've been on, to get from our cabin to the restaurant was quite a mission. It's easy to walk everywhere, and you saw people really regularly, so we made friends with people, and it meant that we bumped into people more and saw the crew, and it had a real community vibe, and sort of like a small village is the only way to describe it. There will be people that I absolutely never saw once, and then there were people that I saw pretty much every day. I'm not sure if a bigger ship would have that same feeling. How did you deal with the time differences? Did they change often? In terms of the time zones, we were always going backwards, so we were always gaining an hour because the way the cruise was going. We started off, New Zealand and Australia were like plus 10 hours or something ahead, and so every time we moved along and sailed close to the UK, we were going like -5, -4, 3, 2, 1. Never had to adjust to any sort of times massively, because an hour, give or take it, we were, you know, it was just when we went to bed. So Benj and I would change our time zones on our phones the night before and then just sort of set an alarm. But it was really clear in the horizon, and they gave you a little card in your room that told you when they were changing and when the clocks were changing. How did you plan your currency for each country? We had to consider which countries we're going to be using card for and not need any cash. Even though we could in somewhere like Australia, we still wanted a little bit of cash. If we were going somewhere where we want a shore experience, it was less likely we'd need any cash for that country because everything was organised for us. But again, if we wanted to tip the taxi driver or coach driver, or we wanted to buy any small souvenirs at the port, and it's unlikely they have a car machine. So there were times where we just had like 20 English pounds worth of that currency, just like a small amount, just in case. We did get cash for quite a lot of places, and I used this little folder that I got on Amazon. I'll leave it linked below, the folder and the clear wallets, but I did show this in our planning video, so you may have already seen this, but as you can see, they're now empty wallets, and I used a little label maker, and I had New Zealand dollars, Australia, Indonesia, Philippines, peso, Hong Kong dollar, Malaysian ringgit, South African rand, some euros. We also had English pounds, which you used to tip some of the crew, and American dollars. That's how we did our money and currency, and we always use Monzo when we're traveling because Monzo is my choice of bank for a lot of my accounts, and I just think they're fantastic. How do you use data on your phone abroad? Did you get an eSIM or a package? So I'm on an EE international roaming plan, which means and it worked in New Zealand and Australia with no extra expense. So for the first 2 weeks we were out on the trip, it was amazing because we were just on our normal data when we were on land. When we were at sea, we were using the Wi-Fi, so we were never on any sort of package for that. And then for the countries where my EE data wasn't included, we basically had to decide, do we actually need data today? Like if we're on a shore experience going to a mud bath in Vietnam, we're not really gonna need any data because we can either connect to Wi-Fi when we're there or we'll be fine off it for 5-6 hours. Or if we were on land and doing our own thing, like in Singapore and Cape Town, we definitely needed data, especially for maps. You can actually download Google Maps for certain areas, but it was just much easier for us because we were also researching like Instagram accounts or looking at things online or Googling history things. So we did want data. For that, we used an app called Airalo, I think. I will leave my referral thing below. Use my code, I get a few dollars, you get a few dollars, something like that. But if I go onto my eSIMs, my archived ones, I used one in the Philippines, Singapore, and then, yeah, it just comes up like this. It's very hard to sort of fully explain and teach you, but essentially follow all the instructions. It is a little confusing. I definitely found it confusing, but once you get it going, it's really great, and then you can top it up. And so I would buy like 1 gig or 5 gig, however much you need, and it works as an eSIM. So that's how we did it. Really, really good app. Really recommend it. Not sponsored, just that's what I used and it worked perfectly. I would definitely use it again. Did you need to sort any visas for your trip, or does the cruise company help with that? So before we left, we had to have New Zealand because we were obviously flying into New Zealand, so that was a no-brainer, and we had to have Australia, and I applied for those in advance. Very easy to do. And then I also did apply for Singapore and Indonesia in advance, but we didn't have to do those in advance. They did them on the ship for you. If you'd already done it at home, then you didn't get charged for it. But if you needed to have it done, the cruise ship would do it for you and then charge your onboard account. Sometimes it was like 10, 15, 20 pounds, something like that. And there were a lot of times where we had to follow certain protocol for passport control, so we'd have to take our passport somewhere to be stamped, or they'd take them from us on the ship or whatever. And a lot of the times we had to go through security and passport control at the terminals as well. In terms of visas, we didn't actually need as many as I thought we would, and any we did need, the cruise ship and company, P&O Cruises, basically helped us, and it was very easy to follow. What was your favourite foods on the cruise? Main dining room, we loved the beef Wellington on celebration night. Every time we saw it on the menu, we all got really excited because it was just amazing. We were calling it beef welly. The beef welly's on the menu tonight. Was so good. Eggs Benedict for breakfast, obviously. That was my favourite breakfast. The lunches were amazing. We had a beautiful spaghetti bolognese, the cheese and onion tart. A lot of the baguettes and sandwiches in the main dining room were just perfect. But I also really loved the pool bar. They had chicken sandwiches. They had like a Subway style sandwich station by the pool, which I really enjoyed. And the buffet, I made up a lot of my own salads, which was really nice. Buffet also had an omelette station, and I enjoyed eating breakfast with Benj by the pool in the morning. It was so nice. Also, some people asked me about what it was like to eat on board and did we get bored of things, and do you know what? There was a lot of variety and a lot of choice, and everything was really tasty. There were definitely things that were hits and misses that I preferred, but that's very normal. And I did feel like it got a little repetitive towards the end, but again, that's kind of a given. There were moments where I just wanted a piece of toast or a bagel for dinner, and although that probably could have been possible if I'd asked around, sometimes I just didn't really need or want anything complicated, which is where the buffet came in handy. But then I preferred eating in the main dining room over the buffet, so you know, swings and roundabouts. So that was the food on the ship. I also wrote down our favourite meals and snacks and food that we ate on land. So Hokey Pokey ice cream in New Zealand was absolutely amazing. Honeycomb crunchy bits, really creamy ice cream that just felt so fresh and nice. Loved it. Steak and chips at Depot in Auckland. We ate there twice. Absolutely loved our meal there. Steak that we had at Six Head in Sydney. That was some of the best steak and the most amazing special date night dinner ever. I absolutely loved it there. Beef Wagyu fried rice in the Crystal Lotus restaurant in Hong Kong Disneyland was absolutely amazing, and we've been dreaming about that ever since. And also the waffles that we had for breakfast in the parks, absolutely absolutely beautiful. Loved those. Nobu, Kuala Lumpur, had an amazing meal there with the black miso cod and the sushi and the dragon fruit cocktails. Go and watch our vlog from that if you haven't seen that meal we had. Amazing. And lastly, Simon's restaurant at Group Constantia in Cape Town. The pasta was divine. The quality was so nice, and the wine that we had with it, and we were a bit giggly at that point. Again, if you haven't seen our Cape Town vlog, go watch it. If you are in a couple, can you have your own table at dining, or do you have to sit with others? So this applies pretty much across the fleet, I think, but I'm speaking from the experience of Arcadia, but I'm pretty sure we've done this on the other ships too, is you get a choice between a set dining time or freedom dining. Set time is basically you're guaranteed a table and you get a choice of either 6:30 or 8:30 p.m. Lots of people do this choice. There's 2 levels to the Meridian restaurant. The set dining time people are on deck 3 of the restaurant, and on deck 2 downstairs is freedom dining, and freedom is when you can literally go to the restaurant whenever you want or whatever time you want to get seated. However, it does get very busy and you might often get a buzzer to tell you when you can come back. Other ships that P&O Cruises have in their fleet do have an app where you can virtually queue, but they don't have that on Arcadia. So we were on freedom dining because there were times we wanted to eat early, there were times where we wanted to eat late. I don't like eating at a set time. I just eat when I'm hungry, and there were times where I definitely wouldn't have wanted to have been boxed into a time. When you get to the restaurant, you then have a choice between eating on your own or sitting with a group. So you don't have to, it's completely personal choice. I would say 90% of the time we ate on our own as a 2. 5% we ate with some friends that we made on board, so we would turn up as a group of 4 looking for a table of 4. Or the final 5% we actually ate in a group setting, and how it works is they have tables for 6 or 8, and it means you don't have to wait, so you can kind of go straight up, but they wait to fill the whole table. So once they filled all the seats around that table, then everyone can order, and it gives you the chance to sit with essentially people you've never met or spoken to before. And if you're feeling like you want to socialize or get to know some other people, it's a really nice way to do a meal. We met some lovely people, had some great conversations. We really enjoyed a lot of the sit down group settings, but we didn't do it that often just because we are faster eaters, and a lot of them would eat for like 2-3 hours and it would just take too long. Was there anything that you took and didn't need, or also didn't take and then needed? I actually think I packed pretty well. I know a lot of you watched my 3-part packing series and thought that I packed an excessive amount, but let me tell you, I think I packed very well. Did have some excess shoes that weren't necessary, too many flip-flops, because I ended up living in Crocs when I was walking around the ship. Crocs were the best, and I'm certainly always packing Crocs for cruises now, or trainers when we were on land, because I needed to make sure that I had good walking shoes because we were doing loads of steps. So I didn't really wear my flip-flops much. I had too many of those. Things that we needed but didn't have, not really. The only thing we really ended up buying was a washing up brush to clean our water bottles. What was the average age on the cruise? Did you feel young, and did you make any friends? I think when people have asked me this question, it's very obvious that most people that want to travel for 2 months and go away for a long period of time are either 2 ends of the age spectrum, roughly. Obviously, there's not going to be your young, early 20s kind of couples or people on board, because ultimately they're going to choose a cheaper option, and there's certainly going to be a lot more retired people. So statistically, if we're thinking about it, yes, there weren't many 30-year-old couples like us that are in a position that can go away for that long. However, let's not forget that we were essentially digital nomads because we were working. We were still working. We didn't actually take 2 months off work, but we did meet some friends. They've taken a sabbatical from work. It was their very first cruise that they had ever done, and they did the full 100 days, and they're now currently back in Asia doing Bali and Indonesia and the Philippines. They're having an amazing time. We're actually going to see them in a few weeks. They both took time off work to be able to go and do it, so it's certainly possible, and we weren't the only young couple. The 4 of us were pretty much the only younger couples, but there were people we met that were 10 years or 20 years older than us, so didn't feel feel like a massive age gap, and we had some really great conversations, and people were, you know, generally like fit and well and felt young. So it wasn't like it was all people that are in Zimmer frames. I think everyone assumed everyone was like really old, but that's just not the case. A lot of the people on board are very adventurous and wanted to see a lot of the world, and so they were sort of in the same mindset as us, so therefore of course we're all going to get on because we all think and feel the same. Also, you've got to remember that there are crew on board that are the same age as us, and they were obviously working, so we couldn't socialize with them in the same way we did with our friends we met, but we still got to chat to them and make friends. Did you enjoy making friends on the cruise, or did you and Benji prefer your own time? Yeah, we loved making friends, and the friends we made, their names are Heidi and Dan, were the loveliest couple. We are so similar. They got married the year before and they're pretty much the same age as us. They are so sweet and we loved spending time with them. I think pretty much most of our black tie nights we spent with them, and we did karaoke and all the games days we did with them, hours and hours and hours playing board games. We often got mistaken for crew. That happened quite a lot. Did you experience seasickness or have any tips for managing it? So I get asked about this a lot, and I find it really hard, and I get really uncomfortable talking about it because I have emetophobia, which is a phobia of sick and vomiting. So I'll keep this light. I always say to people that it's kind of an inevitable part of a cruise holiday, but it's also similar if you were to go on a long car journey. It could be really bumpy. It might be a flat road. It's the same with a ship. It might be choppy seas. It could be completely flat. Like when we went to Norway, the sea and the ocean was just so calm, barely felt any movement ever. Whereas on Arcadia, we travelled a much longer distance. Of course, there were times where the seas were rougher and the ship is smaller, so you do feel it a bit more. But I think I felt a little seasick. I think there were 2 or 3 days total that I actually ended up taking some medication, and the seasickness medication kicks in really well and works really effectively. And then after that, I basically had my sea legs and I was used to it. If you're going on a cruise and you're worried, just get the medication. Lots of people say to like look out on the horizon, that helps, or if you've got any ginger biscuits, that can help. And my brother often likes fizzy drinks. Everyone's different and it's completely subjective to what seas and what type of ship and where you're going and all that jazz. Is the entertainment limited on a long cruise, or is it the same as any other? It's the same. We had some amazing entertainment on board. I was actually really impressed with the quality of variety. I think maybe on a bigger ship you've obviously got more things, like Arvia has an escape room, for example, whereas Arcadia obviously doesn't. And some of the entertainment was certainly tailored towards an older demographic. When I was looking in the horizon each day, I would say that there was stuff in it that I thought, this is just not my cup of tea. However, there was always something that I liked, and I didn't always participate either, and we didn't always see everything. So yeah, the quality and the variety was brilliant. I can't complain. Like, there was so much to see and do. I loved it. Also on this ship, they got really creative with stuff that was going on. So we had things like a talent show that loads of guests participated in, which was so hilarious. We also had things like build a ship on a ship. So there were groups that built these little ships out of cardboard boxes and materials, and then they put it in the pool and we could see if it was floating or not. We had a whole day celebrating crossing the equator, and so they did a whole celebration where lots of the crew were doing games, and that made it really fun and really interesting. I really enjoyed stuff like that. The crew worked really hard to keep us all entertained. It all seemed awesome, but there had to be at least one thing you both disliked. I never want to be negative or moan, because I'm fully aware that this was an epic trip. If I had to say one thing, it would probably be other guests. We had someone take out our wet clothes from the dryer that weren't finished and left it in a basket on the floor, and that was really frustrating. I really didn't like people securing towels and then not actually sitting on their beds all day. Very frustrating. Not washing hands at the sink to go into the restaurant or the buffet or whatever. That was a silly, annoying thing that just, I couldn't fathom why someone wouldn't want to wash their hands. So there were moments where it was the other guests. Never anything the ship did or the crew, just other people. Why is that always the way? What is the one thing that you will remember from the ship crew? Oh, the crew, guys. I wish I could talk to you all day about the crew. They were unbelievable. Work so hard away from their families for so long. I honestly don't know how they do it. Some of them are at sea for like 9 months, And there were loads of moments that crew did special things for us, especially on our wedding day. We had a wonderful reception manager called Sujit, who I talk about in the wedding Q&A, and he just helped coordinate all the wedding day with his colleague Trina, and together they made the day so special. Obviously the captain was an absolute legend. We had Captain Matthew Nichols. He was so nice. He did our wedding ceremony. But all the crew, down to like the ladies that checked us in for the restaurant each night, they knew our names. They were calling us Mr. and Mrs. Lever. Didn't have to ask for our cabin number anymore after like a week, because they knew as soon as we walked up to the desk, they remembered everyone's names and cabin numbers. And then obviously we'd have a waiter take us to our table. But I think the crew member that left the most impression on us was certainly Prakash. He was our cabin host and we were spoilt. He was the nicest person ever. He went above and beyond for us so many times, and he knew exactly how I liked the cabin. He would always bring us ice. I think on the first day around 6 o'clock, Benji asked if he was able to get us any ice or if we could get it ourselves, and he was like, no problem, I'll get it for you. And then every day after that, he either asked us if we wanted some at 6 o'clock bang on the dot, or if we weren't in the cabin, he'd go and do it for us and put it and leave it in the room. It was acts like that, little things that were big to us, like really, really lovely service, and everyone was so friendly, and we loved like the entertainment team. They were brilliant. There were so many people that left a lasting impression, and I wrote lots of slips, compliment slips, and put them in the box in reception because I wanted everyone to be praised for their hard work. But it makes me really emotional because it was just, without the people that do all that, we would never have had the experience we had. So of course we're very grateful. I nearly forgot that the people that worked in the shop as well, I loved chatting to them. I loved it. Oh, there were so many crew. They were all so nice. So nice. Probably because I was constantly popping in and buying things in there. But still, no, I loved chatting to them. It was really good. Any big life realizations while you were away? So many. Some that were deeply personal, so I won't share all of them. But when you have that amount of time to think and process and just be with yourself, sat on the balcony, looking out to the sea, no noise around you. It gives you a lot of thinking time. It was certainly good for the soul. I think because we just got married, which is kind of like normal to think about what's next once you just get married anyway, but like having that combined with obviously sadly losing Bonnie and grieving her and thinking about her a lot, both before and after she passed, but it had us thinking a lot about our life and what's next, and would we ever move house. It had us just talking a lot deeply about where we see the next few years for us both, what our visions and goals are. Many realizations, just a really good reset and opportunity to sort of think deeply, which I appreciated. Did it really begin to feel like home, and was it weird to leave? Yeah, it did. It really felt like home. We felt so comfortable, I think is the best word. Everything was on board. We had everything we needed, bar our dog, and obviously the home comforts. We really did have everything we could want, and it was such an amazing way to travel, and I'd never had to backpack or worry about lugging my stuff around everywhere. I loved it. I felt so happy all the time, really relaxed. Like everyone kept saying to me, you look so relaxed, and I think it's changed me as a person as well, you know, like I've come back feeling like I think and feel differently about a lot of stuff. And a lot of people said to me, you're in like a married bliss bubble and you seem very content, but I actually just think it was the trip shaped me. It changed my life. It actually genuinely changed my life, and I feel really emotional saying that, but it's true. It really is true. So yeah, it was really emotional leaving, because I couldn't believe I'd done it. I couldn't believe we made it happen. Why am I getting emotional?
We're home on English soil.
Coming back into Southampton was mind-blowing, actually. I couldn't believe we'd gone from New Zealand all the way back home. Wild to me, absolutely wild. But yeah, knowing what you do know now, Brogan, would you do anything differently? And the answer is so easy, absolutely no. There was nothing I would have changed, nothing I would have done different. It was the perfect trip for us. We thought so long and hard about it. It was honestly amazing. I've been filming for so long, and genuinely I could talk about this trip all day. So I hope I've covered a lot of the things that you wanted to know. Thank you so much if you did choose to watch the vlogs and support us. If you've subscribed and stuck around for everything else, then I appreciate it a lot. It's really lovely to have you here. Benj and I have big dreams and big plans and big visions, and I really hope that we're able to continue fulfilling them and doing more and more and more. And that is all we really want out of our life at the moment, is just to keep seeing and going places and bringing you along for the journey. So thank you very much. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you again in our next ones. We're off to Disneyland Paris next if you're Disney people, so stick around for that, and then our UK road trip. Okay, big love, bye.